Okay, bienvenidos. Welcome to a plática from the San Diego Chicano Latino Concilio on Higher Education. I'm Dr. Patrick Velasquez, the co-chair of the Concilio. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Miguel Gutierrez, who teaches Chicano Studies at California State University in Dominguez Hills. Miguel and I both represent a very small segment of the Chicano community in California. We are both Chicanos that were raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So we have a different perspective, perhaps, on the challenges of Chicanos in California. Today, we're going to talk about that along with some specific issues that Chicanos face in our state. Miguel, first, bienvenido, and thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned, I've lived now in San Diego for a little over 30 years, but I was born and raised in Omaha. My grandparents were immigrants from Michoacan and Guanajuato in Mexico, and they eventually settled in South Omaha in the local Chicano community there. After my early education, I attended college at the University of Nebraska campus in Omaha, where I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees. Miguel, can you tell us about your own history and the factors that put you on the road to a college education, which historically has been very rare for Chicanos in Omaha?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you how rare it is, or how rare it felt when I was a kid in Omaha, and eventually by the time I got to college. I'm not just a first generation college graduate or college attendant. I'm actually a first generation elementary school graduate. So my family, also from Guanajuato, hardly anybody went beyond third or fourth grade. It was, especially in rural Mexico, it just wasn't a thing that frequently happened unless you had some money and access, which nobody did, right, in our particular communities. So in Omaha, I didn't know anybody that had gone to college as a kid. I never met anybody that had gone to college. I mean, no brown people, and it was important to my parents that I get an education, and my dad explicitly brought up the issue of college 2 or 3 times when I was a kid. And I remember the college talk was really specific, and he pointed out 2 of his friends that had sons that had gone to college. And incidentally, I didn't know any of these 2 dudes that had gone to college. One of them I still haven't met. I don't even know if he exists. He might be like, the unicorn, right? Some mythical entity that went away to college and never came back. So I didn't really have, in terms of the specific role models, to even know what college was, to know what you do at college, or who had gone there so I could talk to, because again, those people did not exist in any of my circles. And my dad did his best to kind of throw that idea at me and encourage me to do it. But the only way that he knew how to do that was to point out 2 of his friends who had sons that had gone to college. Again, I only met one of those guys, those college goers, years later, when I was, I think, in high school or whatever. So we're off to a bad start, right? In terms of, like you said, in Omaha, for working class Mexicanos, Chicanos going to college, it just kind of, we're at a disadvantage already. But as time went on, I joined mariachi in Omaha, and several of the guys there had already, gotten college degrees. One of them had a master's at some point. And that was really important, because as a teenager, having other people that had gone to college and being able to ask some questions, that was an important access point for me.
So I know, Miguel, you participate in the Chicano Awareness Center, which is a nonprofit community organization in Omaha, in South Omaha, in a place where I worked for a number of years. And it's, I thought at the time, a pretty special place and somewhat unique, that you had a group of Chicanos in a place like Omaha. And as you said, these were not elitist folks. These were from very working class roots and families. And they were designing educational programs based on a Chicano vision of what Chicano students need to be successful. And then those Chicanos were actually delivering the services directly to Chicano students. So it was very different than some of the programs I've seen in San Diego, in which you have white folks developing a very colonial vision of education, something that they think is what Chicanos need to be successful. And then they're largely the ones designing even often implementing those programs and services. So how did those Chicano Awareness Center services impact you, and especially working directly with the staff of Chicano?
Yeah, I guess the main word that comes to mind as I hear you talk about it is, for me, it was indispensable in terms of um, college access, right? Because like I just pointed out, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know who to ask. And my parents wanted me to do that, but they also were conscious that I couldn't ask them how to fill out a FAFSA, or how do I do an application, or
Mhm,
right, where do you start? Who do you go to?
mhm,
And so for the Chicano Awareness Center, I met some folks from the Chicano Awareness Center when I was a teenager. And by the time I got to South High School, um, I met the counselor, the CAC counselor that was at South High, Mary Velasquez. And because of her, a lot of the educational research says that you don't have to have a whole bunch of people um, to support you, but you do need at least one solid person to pivot around and really support you and ask questions.
mhm.
And one of those people was absolutely, for me at South, it was Mary Vasquez, that would not probably have been there had it not been for the Chicano Awareness Center and all of the push that had come a generation before I ever got there.
Mhm.
So Mary was able to organize all of these, what do you call them, college tours,
Mhm.
and we could go down and talk in her office about this stuff. And eventually, Marta Delgado was also there.
Mhm.
And so now you have a person like from our community, right? That you know where their parents live, you know their parents, you've seen them at church before, you've seen them around the community. Like you said, these aren't elitist outsiders that come in and tell us what to do. These are people from our own community, homegrown, that have gone through that path before, and they can enlighten you on how to do it yourself.
Mhm.
So those type of services, those type of access points were really important for me. And I remember asking Mary all kinds of questions about what that college world was like. One, I don't know if she remembers this, but one day I actually, she invited me to go with her to UNO to, I think she was going to register for her classes, when people actually had to physically go up and line up and register, right? But she took me with her, and I was able to see, oh, that's how you register for classes,
Mhm.
right? But how would I ever have known that before?
Right.
So through the different programs that I got involved with at the CAC, all of them universally were able to expand my horizons and to see other educational opportunities, whether scholarships or schools or whatever. And it was really, again, indispensable for me in going to college.
Mhm. Miguel, I want to ask you about another dimension of your educational experience in Omaha. I know that you attended the University of Nebraska at Omaha through a program called the Goodrich Scholarship Program, and that's a program that's unique to UNO. Can you tell us about the program? What was your experience like in that program?
Yeah, again, very important, and having access to the Goodrich program at UNO, because once you get to the university, then what, right? I mean, you can have access and saying, well, this is how you register, this is how you apply, congratulations, you got in. Well, now what? It's kind of a jungle out there, right? You don't know how to navigate, you don't know who to talk to. If you run into some issues, where do you find the support? And you can find support in individual professors if they give you the time, if they have the time, if they're inclined to do so, if they know your name. There's a lot of ifs in there, right?
Mhm.
But through the Goodrich program, Goodrich Scholarship Program, it was a nice home within UNO, because I knew all the professors there, and most of them knew me, right? On a first name basis. It feels good to be able, they had that, I don't think it's there anymore, but they actually had like an old house, right? That was where they had like multi-floored old house where they had their offices and all that.
Mhm.
And it was great. There was always students in there. There was always noise. There was always, movement going on.
Mhm.
And anytime I ran into any issues, I wanted to have a conversation about this, anything basically, I could find somebody there that was willing to listen and have a conversation and encourage me and expose me to new material.
Mhm.
It's also important, just even on the financial level, that I was able to get my bachelor's degree without going into debt.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a big old deal, right? For working class, first generation children of immigrants, Mexicanos, Chicanos, not enough can be said about that. So having access to the financial benefits of the Goodrich program, almost the psycho-emotional support, the intellectual push, and having a hub, a home at UNO where you don't feel so lost was very important.
Miguel, I wanted to ask you about also a specific part of the Goodrich Scholarship Program. I worked in student services at UCSD for a long time, and I saw a lot of programs there that were designed to help students of color perform better academically and be more successful. But they were always programs that tried to touch the students outside of their classes. And Goodrich is still, to me, one of the only, if not the only program I've seen that tries to impact educational equity, in which they actually teach their own courses. They have their own faculty and they teach their own courses. So to a large degree, they're controlling a lot of the academic experience that their students had. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about what that meant to you and to actually have that program and its faculty teaching those courses, even though I imagine for much of the time the faculty were not faculty of color.
No, and so we had some faculty of color when I was there, and I had a generally great experience within Goodrich, generally speaking. And when I left UNO and I went to UCLA for my graduate program, I was expecting to find echoes of a Goodrich type program elsewhere, and I didn't find anything, and I still haven't found anything that quite works like that. So I completely agree that that's a real gem that happens at the University of Nebraska at Omaha that supports students that need that kind of support. And it's a multifold support. And so you're right, having, all freshmen would take the Goodrich class. As sophomores, you would take their, whatever, there was a psychology class, the autobiographical writing classes. And so you get to develop a relationship with professors there through their class, but you also see them outside of class all the time. And maybe one or the other one doesn't work so well alone, right? If you only see them outside of class, if you only see them inside of class. But here I would see them all the time. And they also had get-togethers, and at the end of the semester, at the beginning of the semester, they had speakers, they had all kinds of stuff, and we were always all invited to it. So you have multiple contact points to be able to develop human relationships with other students, with your professors, and even students that were like a couple years ahead of you. That's always good, right? Otherwise, you end up talking to people just like yourself, as all freshmen. You don't know what it is like to be a senior. But at Goodrich, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it did feel like kind of like a big extended family there.
Miguel, you've touched on a lot of really important issues today, and I want to be respectful of your time. Hopefully we can invite you back again, and I want to have a discussion with you about the status of Chicano Studies in California and some of the experiences you've had teaching Chicano Studies within the California State University system. So, muchas gracias. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.